Elena, a dedicated cleaner, sees her destiny change after winning the lottery. With a bold plan, she asks for a divorce to avoid sharing the $1 million prize with her husband, keeping the truth hidden from everyone. But what seemed like the perfect solution quickly turns into a nightmare. Days later, just before signing the divorce papers, Elena discovers that the winning ticket holds a devastating secret that could ruin her life. Elena would wake up before the sun rose, always with a smile on her face despite the long work days ahead. She worked as a cleaner in an imposing commercial building downtown. By her side was her husband Marcos, a kind-hearted man with strong arms who worked as a construction worker. Together, they faced life's adversities with determination and love. They lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. Life had never been easy, but Marcos and Elena always found strength in each other. During breakfast, they exchanged loving glances and words of encouragement. "We'll make it, my love," Marcos would say, holding Elena's hand. One day, everything would change. Elena's routine was arduous, starting early in the morning and ending late at night. On what seemed like an ordinary day, she went from room to room, cleaning and organizing each space meticulously. While sweeping the floor of a meeting room, something crumpled in the corner caught her attention. Curious, she bent down and picked up the dirty, crumpled paper. As she unfolded it, she realized it was a lottery ticket. It must be trash, she thought, but something inside her made her keep it in her apron pocket. Later, during her short break, Elena sat in the simple building cafeteria, where the fluorescent lights illuminated the space with a comforting coldness. She remembered the ticket and, with the help of an old, barely functioning cell phone, decided to check the lottery numbers from the previous night. As she compared the numbers, her heart began to race. One by one, the ticket's numbers matched the drawn numbers. Elena felt a wave of shock and euphoria wash over her. "Could it be true?" she murmured, barely believing her luck. Finishing her shift with a mix of excitement and nervousness, Elena went home, where Marcos was waiting for her. They lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts, where life had never been easy. Each day was a struggle, but they always found strength in each other. At dinner, while eating the simple soup Elena had prepared, Marcos noticed she was quieter than usual. "Is everything okay, dear?" he asked with a look of concern. Elena smiled, trying to hide her agitation. "Yes, I'm just thinking about how things might get better." Marcos held her hand across the table. "I know they will. One day everything will change," he said with hope shining in his eyes. Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the winning ticket pulsing like a secret in her pocket. She decided not to tell him immediately. Perhaps it was the fear of raising false hopes or the uncertainty of how to handle the situation. In the following days, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the ticket. During the long hours of cleaning, her mind wandered in dreams of a better future. She began to plan how to use the money to transform their lives, thinking of every detail. A new house, opportunities to study, a life without so many hardships. In the following weeks, Elena discreetly consulted a lawyer to understand her options. She discovered that she could file for divorce before claiming the prize, ensuring that the fortune would stay entirely with her. This decision was not easy. She knew it would bring pain and disillusionment, but she felt it was the only way to secure her future. Finally, one evening, Elena felt she could no longer postpone the conversation. Marcos came home that night, exhausted after a long day of work. When he opened the door of their modest apartment on the outskirts of town, he was greeted by a sight that made him stop immediately. His bags were in the living room, packed and waiting. Marcos's heart raced. "Elena," he called, his voice echoing through the silent apartment. Elena appeared at the bedroom door, her eyes filled with sadness and determination. She knew this moment would be painful, but she also knew it was necessary. "What's going on?" Marcos asked, confusion evident on his face. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words before she even spoke them. "Marcos, we need to talk." He walked over to the kitchen table, sitting heavily in a chair while she remained standing, unsure but resolute. "What's happening, Elena? Why are my bags here?" "I've thought about this a lot, Marcos, and I realized we can't go on like this," she began, her voice trembling but firm. "Our marriage isn't working. We're not happy, and we need to move on separately." Marcos felt a lump form in his throat. "But why? We can work this out. We can try one more time." Elena shook her head, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "I've tried, Marcos, but it's time to move on. It's the best thing for both of us." He looked at her, incredulous and desperate. "You're asking me to leave home?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I've already packed your things. You can stay at your brother's place until you find your own." Marcos was silent for a long moment, pain and confusion mixing in his chest. Finally, he stood up, feeling as if he were in a bad dream. "If that's what you want, then I'll go." Elena watched him walk over to the bags, her heart heavy with the decision she had made. "I'm sorry, Marcos. I really am." He didn't respond. He just picked up his bags and walked out the door, not looking back. Elena stood there alone in the living room, feeling both loneliness and relief at the same time. She knew she had done what was necessary for her future, but it didn't make the pain any less real. Based on this incredible story of twists and tough decisions, what would you do in Marcos's place? Leave your opinion in the comments below. The neighbors, always attentive to the movements in the building, soon noticed Marcos's abrupt departure with his bags. Murmurs began to circulate through the hallway. "Did you see Marcos got kicked out?" whispered Dona Teresa to the neighbor next door. "He must have cheated on Elena," speculated her husband, shaking his head in disapproval. The news spread like wildfire. Each floor had its own version of the story. "I heard he was with someone else," said a young mother in the building's playground. "No, I heard he gambled all their money away," countered another person. The speculations were endless, but no one knew the truth. Marcos, walking through the dark streets with his bags, felt the weight of the curious looks and malicious whispers. He found temporary shelter at his brother's house, but the pain and humiliation followed him like a shadow. Fernanda, a neighbor who always had a special fondness for Marcos and Elena, was one of the first to notice the situation. Sensing something was wrong, she decided to offer her help. The next day, when Marcos left the building, still shaken from the previous night, he found Fernanda waiting for him. "Marcos, I saw what happened last night. I'm so sorry. If you need help, I'm here," said Fernanda with a look of genuine concern. Marcos, touched by her kindness, thanked her. "Thank you, Fernanda. I'm a bit lost right now, but I really appreciate your offer." During this time, Fernanda and Marcos grew even closer. She became a pillar of support, offering not just a place to stay but also advice and unwavering friendship. One day, while shopping at the local market, Fernanda saw Elena talking animatedly with the local bank manager. Something about the way Elena was dressed and the heated conversation piqued her curiosity. She decided to follow discreetly and overheard parts of the conversation that left her intrigued. Later that same week, while talking to an acquaintance who worked at the bank, Fernanda heard a shocking rumor. Elena had won the lottery. Everything started to make sense. Elena had probably thrown Marcos out to avoid sharing the fortune. "I can't believe it finally happened," Elena exclaimed, her smile brimming with enthusiasm. "We need to organize all this quickly." The bank manager responded with an air of complicity. Fernanda, trying to remain invisible among the shelves, heard fragments that left her intrigued. Later that same week, when she met an acquaintance who worked at the bank, she decided to bring it up. "You won't believe what I heard," the acquaintance confided. "They say Elena won the lottery." Fernanda's heart raced. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Elena, always discreet and reserved, was suddenly at the center of the bank's attention. Did she throw Marcos out to avoid sharing the fortune? Fernanda thought aloud, feeling a mix of indignation and compassion. Determined to help her friend, Fernanda went to Marcos's new small apartment. When she arrived, she found him despondent, sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. "Marcos, we need to talk," Fernanda said, sitting beside him. "I think I know what happened between you and Elena." Marcos looked up, visibly dejected. "She kicked me out without any explanation," he murmured. "I was so confused." "Marcos, Elena won the lottery," Fernanda revealed. "I think she did this to avoid sharing the prize with you." Marcos was shocked. The pain and betrayal were clear on his face. "But does she still have the ticket?" he asked, trying to understand the situation. Fernanda nodded, determined. "We're going to get that ticket back. You have a right to part of that fortune, and I won't let her take that from you." Together, they devised a bold plan to retrieve the winning ticket, a mission that required both justice and courage. Fernanda, with her determined spirit and keen eye, and Marcos, guided by the strength of true friendship, decided to confront Elena and the secret she guarded so zealously. It was more than just recovering a ticket. It was a fight for truth and justice that no one expected. With a carefully crafted plan, they began to monitor Elena's movements. Every step she took was followed, every gesture analyzed. Finally, the decisive moment came. With cunning, Marcos managed to obtain the winning ticket. Overjoyed, he ran to Fernanda, showing her the ticket. "We did it, Fernanda. Now we can reveal the truth," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. With the ticket in hand, Marcos finally made the decision he had been putting off for so long. He signed the divorce papers, freeing himself from Elena's manipulative control. It was a moment of liberation, not just for him but for everyone affected by her lies. The air seemed lighter, and a shy smile appeared on his face as he handed the documents to the lawyer. Meanwhile, Elena, who always believed she was in control, discovered that the ticket had disappeared. Desperate, she searched the house, her eyes reflecting the fear and insecurity she had always hidden. "Where is it? It can't be gone," she screamed, feeling the ground collapse beneath her. Every drawer, every cabinet, nothing seemed to escape her frantic search. Based on this incredible story of twists and tough decisions, what would you do in Marcos's place? Leave your opinion in the comments below. At that moment, Marcos, with a serene look, entered the room. "Looking for this, Elena?" he said, holding the ticket between his fingers. Elena froze, the color draining from her face. You can't do this." Marcos took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of suffering and manipulation dissipate. "Not only can I, but I must. This ticket is the key to our freedom. You always used it as a weapon, but now it all ends here." Elena fell to her knees, tears of rage and despair streaming down her face. "Please, Marcos, we can resolve this another way. I've changed." But Marcos knew those words were empty. He turned to Fernanda, who watched the scene from a distance, her eyes filled with hope. "Fernanda, it's time for us to start over. The fortune will be divided equally between us, but the most important thing is that we're free to live our lives for real." Fernanda ran to hug Marcos, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. "Thank you, Marcos. You've given us a new chance." Days later, Marcos and Fernanda met at a charming cafe in the city. The atmosphere was light, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, creating the perfect setting for a new beginning. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, bathing the place in a soft, welcoming light. Marcos was anxious, but when he saw Fernanda enter, his heart calmed. She was beautiful, with a smile that lit up the room. "Marcos, I always knew there was something special between us," Fernanda said, her eyes shining with emotion as she sat down in front of him. Marcos took Fernanda's hand, feeling the connection that had always existed between them. "I did too, Fernanda. I always knew we deserved more than Elena's lies and manipulations." Fernanda sighed, relieved. "I feel like we're finally free to move forward, to build something real." Marcos smiled, a smile full of hope and determination. "And we'll do it together, one step at a time." Meanwhile, Elena, who had lost everything, felt the weight of her actions. Desolate and without fortune, she reflected on her choices and the consequences she now faced. Sitting alone on a park bench, she watched children playing and wondered where she had gone wrong. The cold wind brought her a sense of emptiness, a painful contrast to the joy she saw around her. Back at the cafe, Marcos and Fernanda talked about the future, making plans and laughing together. The connection between them was palpable, and the certainty that they were on the right path brought an indescribable comfort. "We're going to make this work," Marcos said, gently squeezing Fernanda's hand. "Yes, Marcos. Together, we're stronger than any obstacle," Fernanda replied, feeling the same certainty in her heart. And so, amidst the aroma of coffee and the soft afternoon light, a new chapter began for Marcos and Fernanda, while Elena learned the hard way the lessons of her past actions. Elena, now devoid of the masks she used to wear, confronted the raw truth. Lies and manipulations always bring painful and inevitable consequences. Her journey was a painful awakening to the reality that genuine happiness cannot be bought or forced, but must be cultivated with honesty and mutual respect. The story of Marcos, Fernanda, and Elena thus becomes a touching and profound life lesson. It reminds us that although the truth can be difficult and sometimes painful, it is what sets us free and allows us to build a future full of peace and joy. And that integrity, even in the face of adversity, is the sure path to true happiness.